the magical, fantastical, missing trillions. Trillions of dollars have gone up in smoke since the 1970s. And the bankster gangsters are well known to everybody today. The thing that is the biggest stonewall, the biggest backup in getting to the bottom of all of this is the Department of Injustice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation with the U.S. Attorney Generals and Assistant Attorney Generals. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the banking system has been robbed for so much money you can't even count it. Just exactly like I've been telling people since the 1980s. I started telling people about this before the so-called savings and loan scandal. That's going back there a ways. I told everybody that all of these transactions and schemes and scams are being perpetrated using the United States postal system. All of these schemes and scams depend upon the postal system to perpetuate them. And yes, we can immediately go to, wow, think of all the other victims. How many millions of people have been caught up in getting acceleration notices in the mail, letters from attorneys and collectors and servicers in the mail, getting all kinds of billings for the payments on their fraudulent mortgage payments in the mail. The United States postal system is so heavily employed in the furthering of these crimes, it's staggering. During a racketeering law symposium at the South Texas College of Law back in the 1990s, I posed some questions to a federal judge and some prosecutors and a magistrate in front of 500 lawyers at the South Texas College of Law. And I asked if all of the furtherance of these swindles and frauds depends on the use of the U.S. mail. This is what are known as predicate acts of postal fraud. And the resounding unanimous, that's correct response from the prosecutors, the magistrate, and the federal judges was almost immediate. When you use the United States postal system in the scheme and scamming of vanishing trillions out of the national banking system, that's what you call lots of felonies. And when you're destroying records and when you're destroying evidence, you know, you're taking the bleach to the computer servers, and you're taking the hammers and you're busting up all the hard drives, and you know, you're taking the accelerant and getting rid of the financial records associated with the looting of trillions. This is what you call a big old well-financed orgy. A very interesting article from back in the 90s. The Well-Financed Orgy by the Investigative Reporters and Editors Group of the University of Missouri at Kansas City. The Well-Financed Orgy of Banking Crimes. Now I'm going to kind of shift gears here just a little bit. I got a personal axe to grind on the Western banks of Houston, Texas, that falsified and staged, they faked their own insolvency with help from the Federal Depositors Insurance Corporation and the Texas Banking Commissioners. They claimed they were bankrupt and, you know, insolvent, and that prevented my case from going to trial. I couldn't try my case in 1992 because the Western banks were owned by Middle Eastern and billionaires from Switzerland, Dubai, and England, from London. The billionaires behind the Western banks of Houston faked and staged their own insolvency, and then the FDIC merged them or morphed them into the Chase Bank. Chase Bank Texas, or Texas Bank Chase, or something. Chase was at the heart of it. Chase Manhattan. You know, the Rockefeller-owned bank. David Rockefeller, to be very specific. The Western banks, billionaires, have palaces in Monaco. They're on the French Riviera. And then, of course, they've got palaces in England, Switzerland, palaces in Texas. You wouldn't believe the money that Purple Capital controls and the circles that Purple Capital run in. The La Babetti gang of Westgate Investments, who own things like Carlyle Group and Bearing Point and some other interesting properties. Cat Wolford, she knows who she is. Look up the White Elephant Lady. She was selling white elephants at white elephant sales in the aftermath of all the faked and staged bank insolvencies in Texas. Faked and staged bank and savings and loan insolvencies in Houston, Texas, Harris County, Texas, Montgomery County, Texas, all over the state of Texas. Faked bank failures so that the cases couldn't go to trial. Also known as bankruptcy fraud. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in closing this one down, I'm going to make the final comment here. Trillions upon trillions have gone up in smoke. And it's quite obvious the gangster banksters have had a lot of help from the government and covering their tracks. Christopher Wray, Robert Mueller, Jimmy Comey, Louis Freeh, William Webster, and I can name some others like William Weld, and oh, it just goes on. Henry Onken. Who the hell has ever heard of Henry Onken, the assistant U.S. attorney in Houston, Texas, who I was able to get fired. They fired him. They're at 515 Rusk at the Federal Building in Houston, Texas, across the street from the Republic Bank. Imagine that, just to the north of Tranquility Park. I was there, folks. I lived it. My stories in the Houston Chronicle and the Houston Post and all over the internet are true. My accounts, my writings, my videos, my wonderful videos, are calling out all the other victims. I'm calling out the victims all over the United States to join in a mass complaint against the Department of Injustice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Ha ha ha. Ho ho ho. This banking fiasco and all this money missing from the Pentagon and from the Treasury and from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Oh, God almighty. Fannie and Freddie. And all these magical, fantastical, mortgage-backed subprime derivatives. You know, this whole scheme and scam of the $25 billion settlement. I want all the victims across the United States to come together, and we need to raise a great big stink over the way the Department of Justice and the FBI have been covering up for the gangster banksters. They've been foaming the runways for the gangster banksters for a very long time. Write that down. Foaming the runways. And the next chance you get, take a look at Toxic Zombie Developments and the Paper Land Con. Felonious Balonius. And of course, my favorite, the great Texas Bank Job. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it right there. And as always, hasta la vista. God bless. And you betcha, we will be back.